What's going on, y'all? I just wanted to check in and see how things are going. One of my goals for this year is to try to definitely do more videos and engage a little bit more. So my last video, I appreciate your love and your comments. It really meant a lot. And one of the things as I was looking through the comments I saw was somebody was asking about what I meant by my experiences in Minnesota. And so I wanted to spend some time talking about that a little bit more. So let's get into it. All right, so Minnesota. To give some folks some context, I've been living in Minnesota for the last 2 years. How did this happen? Well, I ended up getting my master's degree in health services administration. And after I got my master's, I was looking at where I was currently working, and I basically took a step back and said, I know I can be doing something that I love to do, which is working in public health, but I know I can be doing it in a way that I'm making more money. So I was working for the Virginia Department of Health, making, like a little under $60,000, and I was like, this is not going to be sustainable to pay back student loans. But also the role that I was in, working as a disease intervention specialist, supervisors, in my old job were really clear about like people who work in that role, what we call DIS, have a high level of turnover. And I, not necessarily believe that, but if your leaders are telling you that they expect you to quit and they're not putting in the necessary investment for you to succeed and not be in a role that's basically well known to be short turnover and there's no internal efforts to address that disparity, I don't really want to work for you. And so I went on government jobs and just started putting in HIV and PrEP and rolled across a job working as a PrEP coordinator in Minnesota. And it's funny because I applied to this job and I looked at my husband and I was like, FYI, I'm probably going to get an interview and I'm most likely going to get this job. So are you ready to move to Minnesota? It was paying much more. The benefits were so much better. Where I work at, there's like tuition reimbursement as well as, parental leave if you have a kid, upwards to like 3 months worth of parental leave, really good benefits and leave packages. And so it was like a no-brainer for me. And so ended up getting the job. And it's funny because at the same time we were still in a house that we had to at some point sell. So I left. And many of my videos, if you look back in the past, I was like in this kind of like dungeon looking place. But I was literally in a studio basement apartment, and basically going to work. So my husband and I packed up our SUV. I threw some things in a U-Haul and we drove 24 hours straight across country to get to Minnesota. We basically took shifts sleeping. One would sleep, one would drive, one would sleep while the other drove, and we got to Minnesota. And basically we spent 2 days together in Minnesota, and then he flew back and I kept the vehicle up here to drive and get around. And, one of the things I really didn't know much about was the culture here before I moved here, and especially for the Black experience. I'll be honest, one of the reasons why I moved here was simply because of the fact that I was interested in pursuing doctoral studies, and I was thinking about what is my question going to be about. When you go through a doctoral program, most programs have you basically do a dissertation. A dissertation is basically conducting research around a question. And one of my mentors said, don't pursue your doctorate or a PhD if you don't know what you want to answer. You'll waste your time and you'll spend a lot more time struggling than if you already have a question set up and are thinking about how you answer that question. That's what a doctoral program is set up to do. I'm pursuing a Doctor of Health Administration, and basically it's a practical degree. So it's going to allow me to really apply what I've learned to practice. Most people, when you think about a PhD program, it's centered around philosophy and research. And as much as I love research, and that's why I like the program I'm in, it's providing a level of skills that are helping me this program is helping me build up skills to be able to conduct research, but the research is centered around applying things into practice, like finding the solution to a problem and applying it to the work that you do. And I really wanted to center my research around the African American experience, but more specifically, queer masculine identifying men. So gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men, or anybody on that spectrum, I was really interested in doing research around. And so it was a no-brainer to move to Minnesota because with everything that was happening in the fight for the acknowledgement and necessary work that needed to be invested into Black lives, I felt like the center point was of the movement, the more recent movement, was here in Minnesota. And so I got here, and I will tell you, when I first got here, I was alone. I think Minnesota is really, there's a lot of Nordic kind of culture here. And what I mean by that is like most Nordic folks like that are from like Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden. There's some kind of culture here. And a lot of folks are just really, closed off. I mean, you can have colleagues at work who you talk to, but you have to really work hard to build the relationships to be invited out with with their set of friends and their community, and you have to build that level of trust where, like, in on the East Coast, DC, or living in Virginia, you'd have a neighbor and they'd be like, come on over to my barbecue. That doesn't happen here. You have to have a level of like relationship with the person before you're invited in. And that literally took me about a year and a half to build. And so even to some extent with some Black folks. And, that's one of the things about Minnesota that I would tell anybody to be aware of. If you're moving here, try to tap into a community early, or, really have a sense of like family that you can lean on, either through FaceTiming or talking on the phone with, or just be able to be by yourself. And that's for the first year being by myself here in Minnesota. That's what I did. I took my dog to the dog parks. I went out. I really worked hard to try to build relationships with my neighbors. And even then, it was not the best, but it's just one of the things that I would tell folks before you move to Minnesota, just be aware of. It can be harder to make friends compared to like anywhere else, like on the East Coast or West Coast. Folks are a little bit more conservative here and closed off. Additionally, coming in as a Black gay man, one of the things that I can say that was really challenging was, being in a tokenized role. I came in and people were like, oh, you're going to solve like the Black gay problem here. And I'm like, not necessarily. I think folks don't recognize that, Black queer folks, Black folks, whatever kind of identity you have under the umbrella of being an African American, is that we're not a monolith of information or knowledge. And so, I was born as a military kid, never lived in the Midwest up until this point, traveled through as like a flight attendant or throughout my travels, but never lived here. And so one of the things that was, different was truly the fact that you had, you got to do a lot of learning. And so I think that was a thing. People thought that I would be really knowledgeable coming in and I could apply some of the practices from the South and the East Coast, but it's not the same in the Midwest. Another thing that's really big in Minnesota, if you're moving here, one of the things I found challenging in is that there's not really a central place for Black queer folks to come together. So if you're like Black and gay, there are no Black gay bars. Like, there are spaces and special nights that they have where like they'll have like a, like a, I don't know, like a urban night or whatever. But it's not like in DC where you have like the fireplace or like back in the day, the Bachelor's Mill and things like that. It's really, you're holding space with a lot of like white non-Hispanic folks the majority of the time, unless you have like, again, your own community and you come together and have like your own like kickbacks or like house parties and stuff. Typically you don't have like Black gay bars or anything like that. There are some spaces where they cater to that audience, but again, it's still mostly it's not run by Black queer folks like you would see in other spaces. I think the other thing is seasoning. I'll say this, Minnesotans don't like spicy foods. They don't like their foods to be over seasoned. It's funny because like when we go out to like other spaces, like we frequent like certain Thai spaces or like Mexican restaurants, we sometimes have to ask them to like season the food like non-Minnesotans, because some spaces will give you like very Minnesota seasoned like salt and pepper. That's pretty much it. So it's funny, like coming from the South and being used to a lot of seasoning, that took me by surprise a little bit. But I think it's like, to be fair, it is healthier. And so I've been kind of like leaning into like trying to be comfortable with like less seasoning, but it is very white. And so that's why I love St. Paul. St. Paul is like really a melting pot of different cultures and different food offerings. And it is my stomping ground. And a lot of spaces are really authentic and they will season their food. So you just gotta do your like research, ask your friends, and just kind of go on your own like foodie tour. I will tell you that Minnesota, really the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, kind of the region, the metro region, has some bomb food, and it's really good and it's seasoned. You just gotta get out there and try a couple of things. So reach out in the comments or directly if you want some food advice, because there are some good spaces to eat.
Clear. Like, I will say a lot of Minnesotans who are of color do like spice in their food, do like seasoning in their food, and there are some white Minnesotans that do like seasoning. So I definitely don't want to like basically represent all Minnesotans in that like those comments around seasoning, but I will say that a lot of Minnesotans do not like a lot of seasoning, especially if you're looking at like, if you're going to compare like to other states, that have more of a cultural, tie to food and seasoning, like New Orleans or like, the southern part of the United States, and even to some states like, Texas or whatnot. So just FYI, not saying that it's everybody, but don't be surprised if you come to Minnesota.
I will say racism is real here. There are still, even after all of the advocacy work and all of the fighting to value Black lives, there is still structural and systemic racism still present in Minnesota. And I can tell you that working in my job, I'm facing it. I more recently even had somebody tell me to my face in a meeting with my manager that they didn't trust me because they didn't trust me or feel safe around me. And I think y'all have gotten to know me over these years. I hold space and am honest about the fact that at times, I'm not perfect, so I can be, on wheels. And I honestly am human. I have feelings. I am navigating microaggressions every day. I damn near for the past 30 something years I've dealt with it. And so, I have been getting some of that, like, basically navigate those microaggressions I'm getting. Here. I think one of the most important things to say is that I am bothered by having someone who's not Black, but also a person of color in a space where we are growing to decenter whiteness and address racism and really work towards providing a more psychologically safe space, especially for people of color. And having that said to me is really harmful. I think, this is a retake, and because I wanted to slide this back in, and I think I originally didn't really talk about how being told that someone feels unsafe around me and that they can't trust me, how it makes me feel. It makes me feel like crap. It makes me feel like people get away with weaponizing white privilege in a way to target Black people who are just trying to do their job, especially as it relates to like trying to create more equity, trying to decenter white fragility, but more specifically trying to decenter whiteness in a way that allows people to slide by with not being able to do work and not be held accountable for that. It makes me feel terrible. It makes me feel, when someone says something like that, it makes me feel like someone slandering me, or like it's character assassination. It's extremely harmful and tokenizing to have someone tell you that. It's terrible. And I just want to stress that the importance of that, that if anybody is doing that to you in your professional workplace, you need to call that out. You need to make sure, depending on your state's laws, that you get your evidence together. I don't care if it's a recording. I don't care if you, after that meeting, type up a note and send a synopsis to somebody that can do something about it, or send it to your personal email to keep a record. We got to start as Black folks holding people accountable that want to weaponize and harm weaponize white privilege, because it's being weaponized every day, but try to weaponize Blackness in a way that that is harmful to our status quo, that is harmful to our holistic health, physically, mentally, we have to begin to call that out. So I think it's extremely important on this sidebar here to acknowledge the harms of saying things like that to Black folks in professional, academic, personal, and even romantic environments. It is unacceptable, and we should be working diligently to call people out when they do that. Because if we're doing that, if we're doing the same thing, if the shoe's on the other foot, and any other day, Black folks would not be heard. And it's just really sad. I think any other day, if you reverse the roles, and I'm calling out someone for being unsafe and harmful to me, what happens to us? We get gaslit. We get blown off. No one takes our concerns seriously. But if the roles reversed and there's a Black man being put in the center of a target, too many times we see that Black men are not believed. Black women are not believed. There's these unrealistic stereotypes around how we perform in the workplace or academically or socially, and they don't understand. Just generally, folks who are not African American or Black don't understand the work that we have to do every single day to be better, to do better, to look better, but more importantly, to have the same level of success. We have to do twice as much the work, and I think folks who are not Black do not know nor understand these experiences, and how phrases such as harmful, aggressive, untrustworthy can be really harmful to the holistic health of African Americans. It's shown in peer-reviewed research. It's shown in articles like Forbes. There's articles out there to talk about this. It's harmful, and we have to be really diligent about calling these things out when they happen. We have to. Enough of my soapbox. Let's return to our scheduled programming. The South is very overt, very in your face. Will basically call out the fact that they are racist and they are okay, based off the way they look at you, they address you, they talk to you. While Minnesota people are very nice on the surface, very surface level nice, but then it's really subtle racism, right? And so to give you an example, in the South, my experience has been especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, people in the South will say I don't like that Black Lives Matter movement, but Patrick is a good Black because he knows how to stay in his place, he listens, he's respectful, he went to a good school, his parents gave him good home training, etc. Where here in Minnesota, they like to blanket things. So they'll say well, we all bleed red, Black lives do matter, but Patrick, I don't know, no comment, I don't know, I don't really feel comfortable talking about it. Race here, people don't like to talk about. And one of my things I've learned really quickly in Minnesota, the quickest way to shut down a Minnesotan is to bring up race. That's the quickest way to get quiet. That's the quickest way to get somebody to, disengage, because just race conversations around here are just the quickest way to shut people down. They don't like to talk about race. It's a very uncomfortable thing. They know it when you begin to talk to them, they recognize that it exists. But again, very much like the South, people are comfortable in white comfort, and they still center very much here whiteness. And so one of the things coming from a predominantly Black community in Petersburg, Virginia, running for office, being really engaged, and moving to Minnesota, it's been hard because, again, when you start bringing up these things that are really important to navigate through for communities of color, more specifically communities disproportionately affected by public health issues and negative health outcomes, in my experience, white folks be but then when you start to dive specifically into doing things or asking how they're planning on supporting, it gets quiet quick. And so I just say, just be ready for that if you're going to be coming through Minnesota or working in Minnesota. Again, it's not to be disrespectful. It's not to, turn people away. I think it's just being real with what folks of color face here. I think also one of the things I'm learning is that many Black folks have learned, for instance, to navigate these microaggressions. They're used to it. They're okay with it. And coming from the East Coast, kind of mid-Atlantic up, so from Virginia, Northern Virginia up, Black folks don't necessarily put up with that stuff. And so coming here and seeing how Black people navigate like racism and discrimination, and how they basically like turn a blind eye, and I just can't, like, navigating it my whole life, I just can't, especially in 2024. And so I think that's another thing that I've noticed. But I will say, like, Minnesota's a good place to live. Like, outside of the racism, outside of kind of the covert racism and the structural and systemic racism that's really present, and how some of these folks really are progressive racist, where they run on these progressive far left values, but then when it gets down to like beginning to stand up for Black lives, beginning to stand up for the experiences of Black folks, they get real quiet real quick. They don't really want to actually show up, and they don't produce actions that really, which basically says everything. Actions speak louder than words. I think that really means a lot. And so I see all of that because at the end of the day, those are the cons, but I think the pros is like Minnesota is a really healthy city. There's always things to do. You have multiple lakes, multiple parks. Infrastructure is really valued here, especially around like parks, recreation, and things to do. And I will say it is definitely, although still tied to racism, Minnesota is still a really progressive city with progressive values. And one of the things that I'm extremely excited about is that St. Paul City Council has an all-woman city council. So I think all of these things happening basically say that, like, Minnesota's moving in the right direction, and I hope to be a part of that. But y'all asked, and so I answered. So that's pretty much my take on Minnesota as a Black gay man. I will also say that healthcare here is really good. So as somebody living with HIV, I go to a location within a hospital system, and I've noticed early on that the doctors are really good. So when I have basically had concerns around my health, like for instance, I was having some GI issues, immediately, without even having to beg or ask, my provider was like, let's get you a colonoscopy, let's run a lot of tests. So it's very, they listen to their patients here. I've never had an instance where I felt unheard of navigating healthcare, and so providers are really centered around addressing a lot of health inequities, especially in the work around like HIV, caring for folks living with HIV. So I will give that one of the things that has been surprising for me. And, working alongside other public health professionals who also are working to eliminate health disparities around African Americans, Native and Latin folks. So I think that that's another pro about being here. And just really good education. Education here is really good. So I love the fact that some of the schools here have like Spanish and Somali and Hmong immersion programs, where you actually start school as a kid learning that foreign language first, and then building English on top of that. So that just speaks to volumes where the education is here. And you have the University of Minnesota as well, and McAllister, and some other good schools that provide excellent education. So that's my take. But I will say that it has been hard as a Black gay man living with HIV, living here. To recap, it can be a little lonely. Can take a while to make friends. Additionally, there is still racism here, and discrimination and prejudice, especially for African Americans. We still face it. But the pros are that you have a lot of outdoor things to do. Healthcare is really good. Education is good. And then there's good work that you get, folks get paid. I will say Minnesota is also a big labor union state as well. So the benefit to that is that you're tied, and a lot of jobs are tied by, tied into unions, and have that union protection and advocacy behind them as well. Progressive politics, people-centered politics, and decisions and policies that are made. But I plan on being here for a while, and so I guess without that being said, if you're in Minnesota and want to hang out or catch up or whatever, reach out. I'm always down to make new friends here, and have more allies in addressing and working in the work. So with all that being said, all is well here. Again, I am working really diligently. Right now I'm in the middle of doing like a whole bunch of literature reviews for my class. And so I say that because as I get some opportunities and chance, I will jump on and make a video. So if you have any ideas or any other suggestions, let me know. To follow up with you all, I am still getting my Cabenuva HIV treatment injections. they're getting much better. I have a couple of days where my gluteal area is a little tight, but other than that, I still am doing well. My kidney function's doing well, liver function's doing well. I do have fatty liver, I just found that out, so I'll talk about that in another video. But I still remain undetectable, and we know that undetectable means untransmissible. So that means that, especially when having sex, I cannot transmit HIV. And so the science has proven that, and that's why being undetectable is so important. So if you need help getting into care or advice or anything like that, reach out. But all in all, my phone's going off. There's a lot of things going on. But all in all, I'm still here, still putting out content, just very slowly. Hopefully once I get my doctorate in health administration, I'll have more time to spend with you. So with that being said, stay positive, stay uplifted, and let's keep working to a goal of being able to have a world where there's no more HIV, and have a world where there's no more racism, right? That's the goal. But other than that, I've talked too much. I'm going to jump off. Take care.